Hello, my sweet little angels. Welcome back to Friend Crush. I'm your host, Amber Akilla, and this is a podcast where I talk to myself and I talk to you and I talk to my friends about whatever the fuck I feel like, because it's 2020, and if I've learned anything, it's that life is too short to not do shit that you think about doing. And whatever, I'm just gonna throw shit into the void and see what sticks until I get bored. And I'm sorry that my throat, I feel like I have vocal fry, but maybe it's because I don't speak to anybody during the day. I'm noticing now that I have an inner dialogue, but no outer dialogue, or very little outer dialogue. So speaking more than a sentence feels so weird. Anyway, how are y'all doing? I am doing okay. I have embraced that there's going to be emotional highs and lows, and I don't have to really attach to any particular feeling. Just try to observe my thoughts, observe my emotions, and replace unproductive and disempowering thoughts and feelings with productive and empowering thoughts and feelings. I noticed earlier this year that when I'm living my life, like my regular life, and doing things, and there's no pandemic, I feel like the emotional highs and lows that everybody has are much more spaced apart for me. It's very gradual up and then a gradual low, and then the cycle continues. But this year it's aggressive spikes and troughs. So I wake up one day and I feel good, and that'll last for 2 days, and then I'll wake up another day and it'll be the aftermath of some kind of emotional car crash in my consciousness. And when I was previously kind of living in resistance to that, living in resistance to my circumstances as well, it was very difficult for me to accept that I couldn't go back to Shanghai, and I don't know when I can go back. I haven't seen my friends in so long. I don't know when I'm going to see my friends again. I can't do any of the work that I planned on doing. I have to say no to work now because I am not physically in the place where I work. But at the same time, I'm very cognizant of how privileged I am, and very grateful for the things that I do have in spite of this madness. And, also grateful that I'm allowed this time and space to really reflect on what's important to me, and how I can have better tools and strategies to deal with crisis moving forward. Because I think for a lot of young people, this is probably one of the tougher periods that we've had to go through as adults. Especially as a collective, there's your own personal struggles, and then there's something that is so beyond your control and affects so many people that it's kind of difficult to really come to terms with that and figure out how to move forward, especially because even the generation before us, our parents' generation, hasn't really gone through that either. I guess materially, there's the global financial crisis, which was 2008, but that wasn't you can't fly anywhere and you can't do shit and you can't go outside. Anyway, so yeah, I'm doing okay. I think I'm gonna start all of my solo episodes with a vibe check, because I think it's important to know that not everybody lives in some hyper fun, cool, emotional state at all times. I think it's important for me to be honest with myself and anybody that I come in contact with, how I'm feeling. And even if you're or even if I'm doing okay, there's always, like, at different times in my life, there's going to be like different emotional turmoil that I might be going through. But yeah, in general, I'm doing okay. You know, there are some tough things that I am trying to deal with at the moment, and it gives me a headache when I think about it too hard. But I'm just trying to like create space between me and those feelings and those thoughts, and only having to indulge them when there's actionable steps that can be taken, rather than like marinating in whatever, in a way that's not really helpful to my situation or to how I feel at any given moment. So, yeah. But this does bring me to today's topic, which is kind of like a combination of things that I have been thinking about and how they all come together for me. And like, so basically, it's a bunch of stuff that starts with the letter C. So, control, crisis, consciousness, and character. And this is just like where I'm at with these things. No like final thoughts, no certainty in how I feel about them, just like progress update. I think all of these things I definitely have thought about and reflected on a lot prior to this year, more so like in the abstract. And then a lot of the things that I've gone through this year have really made me stop and reflect and think and rationalize and understand these things in a more tangible way, that I think helps me to better understand myself and the world around me. So when I think about control, I don't think I'm a control freak in the sense that I need to be able to manage every single factor at any given time. But I am a bit of a control freak when it comes to like self-control, personal control, and the way that I conduct myself. So how am I letting things affect me? How am I responding to crisis? How am I responding to difficult situations? Because if there's anything that I've learned this year, it's that you only really know who a person is once you've seen them go through some shit. You know, like you might think that you know your friend or a parent or a sibling because when things are good, you get to see the best of everybody. But then when shit hits the fan, that's when people really show their true colors, and whether they live up to the things that they present themselves as or say that they are or believe that they are can really only be determined when it comes to how they deal with crisis. So for me, when I've faced a lot of tough situations this year, whether like personally or professionally, I've just really tried to be cognizant of like being in control of how I feel and how I respond, and not letting my emotions get the best of me. Because I think your emotions are part of life. You shouldn't deny your emotions. You shouldn't fear your emotions, but you should have like a healthy relationship with your emotions. I think a lot of the time we're doing things out of fear, or we try to suppress emotions that we think are quote unquote bad. For me, I always felt like you kind of have to dive in and feel it, really feel it, in order to like move through it and get past it. Because the more you suppress things, the more they will fester, and the harder it will be to know why you're feeling the way that you feel, and it'll come up in other parts of your life without you even realizing. So one thing that I've had the privilege of doing this year is to start going to therapy. I haven't had that many sessions, but when I was talking about this with her, she said that my therapist described it like holding a beach ball like in the pool, and you know, no matter how hard you try to suppress your emotions, that ball is going to keep floating. So the best thing that you can do is acknowledge that it's there and let go of it and let it float away. And that feeling might come back to you, but you can observe it instead of clinging onto it or trying to suppress it. In the same way that she described it as like, you know, you have bad feelings or thoughts and they'll come into your periphery and you can just kind of say, okay, thank you for that, and let it move on, you know. And that's the practice that I developed through like different forms of meditation. But yeah, she just kind of like described it with a different analogy that I found helpful, I guess. Like, there is no reason to fear bad emotions or bad thoughts. I don't think like having bad emotions and bad thoughts defines who you are as a person, which comes to character. I think it's like how you behave when you have those bad thoughts and bad feelings that defines who you are. And I think it's really reductive to, you know, say whether a person is like good or bad. But, you know, if you want to be moving into like a growth zone rather than be fixed in or like plateauing in one place, then I think it's important to be able to move through difficult feelings and difficult situations with grace and with self-control. And like I said, only when you are faced with crisis are you really going to know. So this comes into consciousness, which is like, for me, a part of like a spiritual practice, how you relate to yourself and the world around you, and you know, the lens through which you see life. And I think it's easy to learn about all these things, learn about what makes a good person, learn about different tactics that will help you through tough times, learn whatever, say that you're XYZ. But again, like, only when you really go through shit are you actually going to put those things in practice. So someone can tell you that they're a good person, that they are supportive of their friends, that they are progressive, etc., that they're generous. But then when they're faced with a crisis, sometimes all of those things just fly out the window and someone defaults to a very selfish state. And I think like real consciousness and real mental strength and strength of character comes when, in spite of crisis and difficult situations, you're able to exercise self-control and to be true to your values and not just act out of, you know, like malicious instinct or get defensive or default to like fight or flight. So those sorts of things are important for me in getting to know who I am and who I want to be. And yeah, something that I've been observing, and, you know, something that I've been like observing in other people, because I also think like, because of this like social media culture that we live in, where you are seeing like very surface level interpretations of people, very surface level representations of people, we forget how much like someone's behavior, how someone interacts with like people that are physically around them, is more of a testament to who they are than just who they present. And I think that it's easy to get caught up in the way that you seem to other people, the way that you are perceived, and not like who you actually are. And that is what is most important to me. Like, who am I to the people that I see on a day-to-day basis? Like, am I a good daughter? Am I a good friend? Am I a good partner? Am I a good employee if I am employed? Am I a good collaborator? Whatever. Like, I think creating space between you and your ego is so important. And I just learned about this concept of like a digital ego, and I think, you know, that's like how you're presenting yourself online, and it is so easy to get caught up in that, especially in times like this when so much of our communication, our interaction is done through the internet. But what really matters to me is like who I actually am and not how I'm perceived online, because I mean, most of the people that would come in contact with me in a digital space will never actually meet me like in person. And I'm very cognizant of like people that I've met who don't really live up to their online persona in a way that's kind of like disappointing. Like, it's different if you're like, oh, you're really extroverted online but you're really introverted in person, but it's like, oh, you seem really like smart and self-aware online but you're actually like kind of a dick in real life. I'm like, that's not the person that I want to be. You know, if I want to be a dick online, then I want to be a dick with my whole chest in person, you know. If I'm going to be a good person online or somebody that has character and integrity, then I would hope that that's who I am in person. And I think too often people get caught up in how they are presenting and working on this image craft social media bullshit and not actually doing any self-reflection. Because I can tell now when I meet somebody and they have like no center. Whatever they say is not rooted in anything. They just kind of like mirror what you say, or you can tell that they've just kind of like mashed together a bunch of shit that they've consumed online and like regurgitated it. Like, there is no consciousness behind what they're saying. It's just whatever they can say or do to seem like cool. But that to me is not cool. I think what is cool is like being nice and using your brain to like think critically about not just the world around you but also who you are. Like, I always believe that there is room to grow and learn from your mistakes and become better rather than be stagnant or be a victim to your circumstances. I think that's something that I've had to work through and process this year, like, because so much of what was a part of my day-to-day life has been taken away or is no longer certain. Kind of like being true to who I am in different circumstances and not thinking that I have to be in Shanghai, I have to be doing XYZ, I have to be eating hot pot every week in order to be me. I'm still me, but the things that I'm doing are going to be different, and that's okay. You know, I think we can get comfortable in what's familiar, and being adaptable is a skill that you can learn, and you can only learn it by doing shit. You can't really, like, at some point you have to like stop thinking and start doing. Like, not just me, but a lot of my friends have also been going through, you know, tough things. And I always say that we can keep talking about this and you can keep turning it over in your head over and over again, but ultimately you're just going to have to face it. It's not like you realize something and that's it. It's like you realize it and then you have to put it into practice. And that again is kind of like consciousness and also character. Somebody who is able to take what they know and put it into practice, to take what they believe and put it into practice, is somebody who has character for me, not somebody who can just intellectualize things. Because I think it's really easy to over intellectualize and to think and to say, but like, what are you doing? Like, what are you actually doing? How are you treating the people around you? How are you showing appreciation for what you have? How are you showing up for the people in your life? So yeah, that's all I have to say about that right now. Let me know your thoughts and feelings. And yeah, updates to come if anybody's interested. Just, that was a vibe check, you know? Things I've been thinking about. Okay, obsession of the week. So, if you follow me on Instagram, you may or may not be aware that I have watched Christopher Nolan's most recent film, Tenet, twice in cinemas, because cinemas are open in Perth because there hasn't been any community transmission for quite a few months now, which I'm very lucky to be in this place that feels like a retirement home. Anyway, Chris Nolan's film Tenet, starring John David Washington, who I didn't know was Denzel Washington's son until after I watched it for the first time and started watching explainer videos, and Robert Pattinson, who I'm like ironically obsessed with because I'm thinking back to like when I was obsessed with Twilight and just like a simpler time, and I also just think it's really inspiring, like the trajectory of his career from being like possible corny teenage heartthrob to somebody who like really tried to challenge himself through his work and then comes out the other end in blockbusters and like as the next Batman. Like he went from being like a teenage bat, like a vampire, to being like the Batman within a span of 10 years. Anyway, so, and also like John David Washington used to be a football player and now he's an actor, and like the things that he learnt or the experiences that he had in football and like how he had to engage with his physicality have played a big part in how he trained for Tenet. So, I'm not just I don't really obsess over things like in isolation. I kind of like look at things, I kind of like think about the things around it, which I will discuss in a future episode about why I'm obsessed with BTS and what they represent. So yeah, Tenet, huge mindfuck. If you are looking for an adrenaline rush, it was definitely the biggest adrenaline rush I've had this whole year. Most of this year has just kind of been like a depressive lull with moments of clarity and joy. So I have a newfound appreciation for movies as somebody who isn't like a regular movie watcher or movie goer. I think I've like had enough thoughts and I'm just ready to escape. I can only do so much in terms of hedonism when I'm in Perth and it's a pandemic and I can't really do shit the way that I want to. So escapism is where it's at, everybody. Just watch movies and TV. I mean, that's already what everybody's been doing. I'm just late to the party. So yeah, it was great for adrenaline rush. I just felt like it was nice to mentally engage with something that wasn't rooted in my actual reality. So I watched it the first time, I watched a bunch of explainer videos, and then I watched it a second time, and I was able to kind of piece together what was happening in a much... So yeah, I watched it a first time and just kind of like experienced it. And then I watched a bunch of explainer videos. So I was like, okay, now I get it, kind of. And then I watched it again in cinemas. And then I was able to experience it while being able to kind of piece it together at the same time. So yeah, I mean, if you think too deeply about it, you can talk about plot holes, whatever. I read some article that was talking about how it's like anti-science propaganda. I don't know about that. I feel like it's more like anti-Russia propaganda. That is one thing that I'll say, because like the villain is Russian and he's a weapons dealer, but like a little Google will show you that the US produces the most weapons by country. I think Russia is second, but it's just interesting. I think like Hollywood and films and the way that pop culture is shaped, especially in the West, because people kind of like aren't willing to admit that there is some kind of agenda behind it. When so much money is being poured into a film, there is some political interest in it, I think. So obviously, like being able to themes of like sacrificing yourself for your country, the apocalypse being not America's fault, but something that America has to save the world from. I don't know. I mean, it makes sense that if you're an American, you would make films from that perspective, but I just think it's interesting the reach that Hollywood films have on the world, and the influence that they have. But I still, can separate that and just be like, it's a good piece of entertainment, which it is. It's a good adrenaline rush, which it is. So that's my obsession of the week. Tenet. And then my content crush. I don't really have a content crush. I opened up this book that I have. I think my mum bought it ages ago, but I remember reading it in my first year of uni or something. It's called The Art of Happiness by the Dalai Lama. I opened it up and it was like, life is suffering. And I'm like, okay, true. So I'm reading that and maybe I'll provide updates on any insights that I get. So that's kind of like the beginning of a content crush. I mean, obviously it resonated with me. I do really think that book changed my perspective on life. And I think one thing that I will say is that revisiting a lot of these texts that I read when I was younger, that really kind of shaped the way that I see or approach life, has been good for me this year, because it reminded me of like what actually is important instead of getting caught up in other people's bullshit. So reading shit like Eckhart Tolle and Art of Happiness and Bell Hooks All About Love has been helpful, because so much negativity out there, so many people projecting left, right and center, and you just have to find ways to like actually live your life and not just get caught up in the circus. I love to watch the circus every now and then. It's entertaining, but I have to separate, create distance and space between who I am and the circus itself. So yeah, thanks for listening. I hope everybody's doing okay. It's okay if you're not doing okay, but try to think about things that you can do to make yourself feel better, because we have to take responsibility for our lives. We have to be in control in times of crisis. We have to be conscious of who we are, who we want to be, and we want to be able to live lives and be upstanding people who do as they say and say as they do, I guess, right? I don't know, I'm just trying to figure it out. Maybe I'll do an episode on self-care practices that are like not corny. I feel like a lot of the things that I want to talk about kind of all feed into each other. Like self-care practices also kind of goes into like body image, in the sense that how you treat yourself and see yourself is important when it comes to self-care. I really, really appreciate people that have sent me messages after they've listened to an episode and told me how they feel and their thoughts. I really didn't think anybody would listen, so I do appreciate even just one person, even just a few people that have reached out. Oh, stay hydrated and sit up straight. Warm water only. As we have learned, warm water is better for you because cold water makes your blood vessels constrict and it makes it harder for you to digest food, and it requires more energy to 消化 process in your body. So try and drink room temperature or warm water where possible. Eat room temperature and warm foods where possible. Like life is stressful enough, okay? Don't put more stress on your body than is required. And if you're slouching in your chair like I am, sit up straight. If you're feeling really stressed, take some deep breaths. Breathe in, breathe out. So important. I've had to do so many fucking breathing exercises this year to stop myself from having a meltdown. We do what we need to do to cope in these difficult times. Oh my god, I actually have vocal fry. This is the longest that I've spoken like all week. So yeah, thank you again for listening, and take care of yourself and the people around you. Stay hydrated, sit up straight, and I'll speak to you soon. Bye.